behind the gates of a billionaire's mansion, there lived a little girl starved for love, and a housekeeper who dared to give it. This is not just a story about money or power. It's about dignity, love, and the courage to stand against cruelty. And in the end, it's a child's innocent question that brings an empire crashing down. They say some houses are too big for their own good. Edward Whitmore's mansion was one of them. It stood like a palace on the edge of New York, with shining glass windows and a lawn so perfect it looked painted. To the outside world, Edward was a man of success, wealth, and class. He had built companies, appeared in magazines, and held charity dinners where his smile stretched wider than his heart. But inside that mansion, behind those perfect walls, lived shadows. Edward's pride was not just in his money, it was in control. And the people who worked for him felt that control like a heavy chain. In only 6 months, 11 women had walked through those golden gates with hope and left with tears. 11 housekeepers, most of them women of color, fired one after another. Edward always had an excuse. They don't meet my standards. They don't understand class. But if you looked closely, the pattern was too clear. One day, a new housekeeper arrived. Her name was Angela Brooks. Angela was not a woman of wealth. She was a single mother, carrying life's burdens on her shoulders. But she walked with a kind of quiet strength. Her grandmother, a wise old woman from the South, had raised her with one saying, "Child, dignity is the one thing the world can't take from you unless you hand it over." Angela believed that, and though her clothes were plain, her spirit carried a richness Edward could never buy. She entered the Whitmore mansion not just for a paycheck, but for survival. Her little daughter, Mia, needed school fees. Rent was late. Life was heavy. But Angela still greeted everyone with a soft smile, because she had learned long ago that kindness costs nothing. At first, the days passed quietly. Angela worked hard, polished silver until it shone, and cared for the mansion as if it were her own. But Edward was a man who watched for mistakes, not for effort. Then came the moment that changed everything. Angela found herself in the nursery, tidying up after Lily, Edward's young daughter. The child was fragile and quiet, almost like a flower starved of sunlight. Angela noticed the girl's doll lying on the floor, a delicate doll with a silk dress. She bent down, lifted it gently, and brushed its golden curls with her hand. It was a simple, innocent act. But Edward saw it. He stormed into the room, his voice sharp like a whip. "What are you doing?" he thundered. Angela froze, holding the doll carefully. "I was just putting it away, sir," she said softly. His face twisted with disgust. "Don't you dare touch my daughter's things with your hands. Don't you ever forget your place in this house." The words sliced deeper than any knife. He wasn't just scolding her for touching a toy. His eyes, his tone, it all carried something darker, something that said, "You are less." Angela lowered her gaze. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She placed the doll back gently, nodded once, and walked away. Outside the mansion gates, her hands trembled, not because she was afraid, but because of the quiet fire growing inside her. This was not just about a doll. It was about every woman before her who had been humiliated and discarded. It was about the 11 who had left before her. It was about the system Edward had built inside his glittering walls. Angela went home to her small apartment, where her daughter Mia ran to hug her legs. She hugged her back tightly, holding on longer than usual. Then later that night, she sat by her window, looking up at the sky, speaking softly to the photo of her grandmother that rested on the table. "Grandma," she whispered, "I won't let him break me. Not me. Not anyone else. He thinks his money makes him untouchable. But I will show him. Dignity is stronger than hate." Her words weren't just a promise. They were the beginning of a battle. From that night forward, Angela began to collect small truths. Receipts, Notes. Stories from other women who had been fired. She listened, she wrote, she saved. She didn't know exactly how, but she knew one day she would rise. And so, in the heart of New York, under the shadow of Edward Whitmore's mansion, a quiet storm was beginning. Angela Brooks, the housekeeper he thought he could silence, was preparing to fight back. Not with anger, but with truth. Not with money, but with dignity. The House of Shadows would soon face the light. The night after Angela left the Whitmore mansion, she could have chosen silence. She could have swallowed her pain, buried her pride, and searched for another job. After all, that's what many of the women before her had done. But Angela was not like the others. She carried her grandmother's words in her chest. Child, dignity is the one thing the world can't take from you, unless you hand it over. So instead of silence, Angela chose to fight. Her plan began small. She called Maria, one of the women Edward had fired 2 months earlier. Maria was hesitant at first. Fear still lingered in her voice. But when Angela explained, Maria's voice grew steadier. He said the same things to me, Maria confessed. He told me I didn't belong in his house. I thought it was just me. It wasn't just Maria. One by one, Angela found them, the 11 women. Their stories matched like puzzle pieces. Each one had faced humiliation. Each one had walked out with dignity wounded but unbroken. Angela kept their words in a notebook. Dates, times, exact insults, patterns no one could deny. But evidence alone wasn't enough. She needed a voice strong enough to echo beyond those mansion walls. Angela turned to someone she trusted. Her cousin Danielle, an investigative journalist known for chasing the truth even when it burned. Danielle listened quietly as Angela laid out the notes, the receipts, the testimonies. When Angela finished, Danielle closed the notebook slowly and looked her cousin in the eyes. Angela, she said, this isn't just a story. This is a movement waiting to happen. And so, Operation Dignity was born. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, another woman was still working, Carmen, a quiet housekeeper who had seen everything but stayed to protect Lily, Edward's daughter. At night, Carmen called Angela with whispers. Lily asks about you, she said one evening. She misses the way you sang to her. She doesn't laugh anymore. Angela's heart tightened. She hadn't stopped thinking about Lily, the fragile girl with eyes too sad for her age. Edward might own the mansion, but Lily was the innocent soul trapped inside it. And in the end, Lily would be the one to change everything. Angela wanted to give Lily a piece of joy, something Edward could never buy. So one afternoon, with Carmen's help, she returned quietly to the mansion while Edward was away. She brought a simple gift, a doll's wig of golden curls, the kind Lily loved. When the child saw it, her face lit up like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Angela placed it gently on the doll's head, then knelt down and brushed Lily's hair with tender hands. For a moment, the room was filled with laughter. The kind that heals, the kind that says love still exists. What Angela didn't know was that Danielle, her cousin, was filming the entire moment discreetly. Not just for evidence, but to capture the truth. That kindness had always been the one thing Edward could never buy or control. But storms never wait long. Edward returned earlier than expected. His footsteps echoed through the hall before he burst into the room. His face turned red when he saw Angela. "You again?" he roared. "Didn't I tell you never to step foot in this house?" Angela stood tall. She didn't flinch. "I came to see Lily," she said softly. Edward's rage burned hotter. "You people never learn your place. You touch what isn't yours. You think you belong here, but you never will." The room fell silent, until a small voice broke through. "Daddy!" It was Lily. Her tiny hands clutched the doll with golden curls. Tears filled her eyes. "Why do you hate the people who love me?" she asked. Edward froze. His anger stumbled in the face of his daughter's innocence. For the first time, his mask cracked. And then came the click. Danielle stepped forward from the shadows, camera in hand. "It's over, Mr. Whitmore," she said firmly. "The world will hear the truth." Within days, the footage spread like wildfire. The testimonies of the 11 women, the recordings of Edward's cruel words, and the tender moment of a child asking the one question money could never silence. "Why do you hate the people who love me?" Edward Whitmore, the man who thought his fortune made him untouchable, fell from his pedestal. Lawsuits rained down. His name, once spoken with respect, now carried shame. Business partners left him. The mansion that once stood like a fortress became a prison of his own making. But out of his downfall, something beautiful grew. Lily, no longer hidden in shadows, found herself surrounded by women who loved her. The very women her father had tried to cast out. Carmen stayed. Angela visited often. They became her true family, teaching her laughter, resilience, and love. And every time Lily brushed the golden curls of her doll, she remembered the woman who had shown her that dignity could never be destroyed. Angela never saw her fight as revenge. It wasn't about bringing Edward down. It was about lifting dignity up. Because in the end, true wealth is not measured in gold, or mansions, or power. True wealth is in the heart that refuses to bow to hate. And that is the story of Angela Brooks, the woman who proved that even in a house of shadows, light will always find a way.